Hello, I'm Dr. Laura Flora Shaw, and this is We Are the Matrix. Now, first, I want to note when I say doctor, I'm not a doctor of medicine, nor am I a doctor of philosophy. My doctorate is in education. So I just want to get that out of the way. I will tell you more about myself later on in this episode, but first, I want to focus on what this podcast is all about. So, this is a space for exploring the systems, the paradigms, the narratives, the frameworks, essentially the matrix, all the things that shape us, while simultaneously holding the realization that we can either perpetuate those systems, those paradigms, those narratives, the matrix, through our own beliefs and our own actions, or we can create a new matrix. So when I use the word matrix, I'm essentially talking about all things culture. Personally, I don't believe we're in the matrix. I don't believe that the belief that we're in a matrix is particularly useful. What I think is that that belief makes us victims of the matrix. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a victim. But believing we are the matrix, that actually empowers us. And that helps us realize that we can create it. Okay, so you might be thinking, I didn't create any of this. I was born into it. And that's true. We're born into it, then we're conditioned by it. Culture conditions us. But the matrix is human made. It was made by humans. All of this is culture. It's made up. So why can't we make up something different? Why should we continue to perpetuate the matrix through our own actions and beliefs when it's all made up to begin with? I mean, ask yourself, what do you want to do? Do you make jokes about escaping the matrix, but then do your actions perpetuate it? Or do you want to see it change? Do you want to change it? Now, if you ask yourself that question and you want to change the matrix, but you want it to go back to a time period that you think was most beneficial to you, then this podcast probably isn't for you. Personally, I'm not interested in upholding narratives that only benefit a few of us. I'm much more interested in creating things anew, thinking about how society could be structured, even in our just little parts of society, how they could be structured, right? So I'm not talking about a centralized society. I'm not talking about replacing these centralized institutions with other centralized institutions. I'm talking about creating different structures in our parts of the world that allow all people to flourish. That's what I'm interested in. So, our current matrix, at least in the West, consists of many paradigms. I'm talking about imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy culture, patriarchy, capitalism, rationality and objectivity, the narrative of the savior, Christianity. I mean, these are just a few. And humans created these paradigms to gain power for a few over the rest of us. But why should we see ourselves as victims of these paradigms? How is that helpful to us? It's not. Why should we see ourselves as stuck in the matrix just because we've been conditioned by it? I mean, we have the gift of self awareness. I mean, some people have it more than others, but we can become aware of our conditioning and then we can decide what we want to do, what we want to believe, how we want to act instead. When we see ourselves as stuck in the matrix, then we're more likely to look for saviors to save us from it. So then we give our power away to yet another external authority. This could be a political figure, a god, whatever, who we think is going to save us from the external authorities that we want to escape from in the existing matrix. That's actually kind of kookadoodle, if you really think about it. But again, this matrix was designed by humans, and it was specifically designed to give our power away to something or someone else. So the savior narrative is actually a matrix trap, and we need to stop falling for it. So I live in the US, and what I have noticed is that people on both sides of the political spectrum very much believe in saviors. So some of us believe that our current president is some sort of savior. Others of us believed that his opponent in the last election was going to save us from him. And even now, there are people on social media who still talk as if she is gonna swoop in and save us. But the truth is that no one is gonna save us. No one, not the current president, not any future president, not an extraterrestrial, as much as sometimes I feel like I'd like to be beamed up. Believing in saviors means giving up our individual power, which is exactly, as I said, what these systems are designed to do, our existing systems, our existing institutions, many of them. The people who really benefit from the system as is, who are trying to extract as much power and wealth as they possibly can, as quickly as they can, they want us to feel powerless. But with everything that's going on, like politically, technologically, with AI, what's happening with the media, again, I live in the US, so I'm talking primarily about the US. I think all of these things are happening because it's almost like we're being forced to go within to figure out what we really want. It's like we're being forced to stop looking outside of ourselves for that savior. We're being forced to take our individual power back. It's almost like the universe is asking us each individually to figure out what we really think, what we really feel, how we really want our lives to be, how we want our lives to feel on a day-to-day basis. I think we're being asked to analyze our own conditioning. I mean, we've been giving our power away forever. We give our power away to our parents, our peers, corporations, friend groups. We give our power away so often. Like, why are we doing that? But when I'm talking about creating something different, I'm not saying, again, that it has to be something so big, like we're going to come to some consensus around this like really big thing and we're going to make this really big shift. I'm just talking about empowering ourselves, each of us. What might be good for you might not be something that I want or that I think is good for me. And that's okay. But I think each of us need to figure that out for ourselves and then structure our immediate environments in a way that allow us to flourish, that allow us to feel like we don't have to mask anymore, or at least not as much. I mean, preferably anymore, but at least not as much. So I think any kind of change is going to come with us taking our individual power back. It's going to involve us becoming aware of our own conditioning so we can create new beliefs for ourselves, new actions. And from that, those individual changes, from that could emerge a new kind of matrix. Now, can we actually create a new matrix? I think we can. In fact, I think we should. I think it's our responsibility. If we don't do it, who is? I mean, I could name some people who think that they're doing it right now. I think you could too. But why should they get to do it? If we let other people do it, we will stay trapped in our victimhood. And that victimhood, that is a form of ego. We typically think of ego in terms of like arrogance and narcissism, but victim consciousness is very much an egoic thing. And as it is, when I look around the world, and maybe you don't see this, but I see it, I just see egos just like clashing everywhere, constantly. I mean, they're clashing on the world stage, they're clashing in our local governments, in our federal government, in our workplaces, in our family. It's just like a constant clashing of egos that have been conditioned by the culture, the many different narratives, paradigms, systems of the Matrix. And it's like they're trying to win at the Matrix. They're trying to win the Matrix, the video game that is the Matrix. They want to win it. And by winning, they're trying to extract as much wealth and power from the Matrix as they possibly can. And some of these people doing this, it's like we're watching their daddy wounds play out in real time. Like, get some self-awareness and some therapy so the rest of us don't have to suffer because you're trying to fill some sort of void or wound by oppressing others or taking from others. But here's the thing. We have egos, but we are not our egos. I don't think so. I don't think that we are our egos. There is a part of us that can observe our egos. There is a part of us that can observe the chitter chatter that goes on in our heads. And for some of us, that is a lot of chitter chatter. And it can go on and on and on. But then at some point, we start to notice that chitter chatter. And we might realize that that's the chitter chatter of like our third grade teacher or something. It's not us. The real us is the part, the observer, the part that observes that chitter chatter. Some people might refer to this as like the soul, the universe. Eckhart Tolle, who's a spiritual teacher, refers to it as the deep I. It's that part of ourselves that when we connect with another person, even if we don't know them, for whatever reason, it's like you see them and they see you. That's what I'm talking about. And I saw recently a clip of George Carlin in I think it was a 1996 interview with Charlie Rose. Carlin said, "I love people as I meet them one by one. People are just wonderful as individuals. You see the whole universe in their eyes if you look carefully." That's the self that I'm talking about. And honestly, I was really surprised to hear Carlin say that, but it really, he got it. He really got it. And I think that that is the self that really should be shining through. Not the egoic self, but that deeper self. But we're humans, and so we have egos. And so I'm not interested in killing our egos. I don't see that as beneficial either. And in fact, I don't even think that we can kill our ego. I feel like that if we start thinking as individuals, like if I think I have transcended my ego, I think that is probably my ego tricking me into thinking that I have transcended it. Because the ego, it's a trickster. It's not inherently bad, but it is a trickster. It will trick you into feeling like you are under attack in your dining room with nobody home as you think about like something that's happening at work or some potential future bad event that could maybe happen but hasn't even happened, and there's no likelihood even of it happening or very little likelihood even of it happening. And the other thing is that the ego is kind of relentless. Anxiety runs in my family. I have more of an anxious kind of temperament, and I've been working on it for a while. And when I started to realize that the true I was the observer of the anxious thoughts, and I realized I didn't have to identify with those anxious thoughts, the voice in my head would still say, but what if this time that bad thing you think is going to happen will really happen, or it does really happen? What if? I don't think that we should let a trickster who gaslights us, right? Who like will gaslight us. I don't think we should let that run our lives. It just doesn't seem like a very good idea. And right now we are watching egos here in the US destroy our institutions. And some of us want that destruction to stop so we can go back to the way things were in whatever idealized time period we think was ideal. But again, maybe all of this destruction is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to create new ways of being in the world. I mean, it's not as if these institutions have been serving each and every one of us in the best way possible. I mean, that's not to say that they were all bad. But at the same time, how many of us have had to adjust ourselves in order to fit ourselves into those institutions? I mean, how have we had to adjust ourselves in order to fit into school, the workplace, or our church community, or the community we live in to keep up with the Joneses? How much adjusting have we had to do? And how many of us mask who we are all day long at school, work, or whatever, and we come home and we're burnt out and we're exhausted, not because of the actual work that we're doing, but because of all the masking, particularly for those of us like me who are neurodivergent. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that we can rebuild the matrix or the matrices. Maybe it's not even like one matrix, but it's like matrices overnight. And I'm not naive enough to think that everyone will want to change the matrix or to do the necessary personal work inside to change it. I mean, do you remember during COVID, the let's reimagine education discussion? As an educator, and I specialize in Montessori education, but as an educator, I was super excited to have this conversation about reimagining conventional education. But what happened to that discussion? I mean, it petered out pretty quickly. And there's a lot of reasons as to why it petered out, but I think that there are two in particular, I think, that are significant. So, one is that too many people benefit from the system as it exists. And I'm not talking about students or teachers, I'm talking about like corporations, textbook companies and curriculum writing companies and blah, blah, blah. I think the other reason that conversation of reimagining education petered out is because we as humans, we are creatures of habit, and habits are really hard to break. Most of the time, we are operating on autopilot. We have to. We cannot consciously think about every single move we make. We cannot do that. That's not adaptable. To adapt as a species to our environments, we had to develop automatic behaviors, habits. And to change those habits, again, conditioning, so they can also be mental habits, habits of mind, that requires a lot of conscious intentional control, which requires a lot of effort and energy. And giving people information doesn't change their behavior because of habits. So we can know, for instance, that we need to eat our greens, and we will still choose the chocolate ice cream instead. So we can know something, but if we have a habit of eating chocolate ice cream every night, then that's what we're going to default to. But then some of us get older and become lactose intolerant. And so even just a tiny little cup of ice cream hurts our tummies. But that's a whole other podcast. But again, habits, okay, we can label them as good or bad, but they just are, right? Habits are. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have survived as a species. We cannot operate effectively in the world with just conscious, intentional control. Thinking takes time. If I have to consciously think in order to run away from a tiger, that tiger's going to eat me. If I have to consciously think about every single move I make when I get up in the morning and I go into the kitchen cupboard and I make a cup of coffee and I have to think about every single move I'm going to make, life is going to be really, really, really hard and long and exhausting. In fact, there's a BBC documentary about a gentleman named Ian Waterman. I think he has since passed, but he developed some sort of autoimmune condition, I think it was, when he was 19 years old, that made him immobile. So he wasn't paralyzed. He could move his body, but in order to move his body, he had to visibly see it. So he couldn't move it in the dark. And he had to use conscious intentional control for every move that he made. For instance, it took him 1 year to learn to stand upright safely. 1 year. Now, once he learned to stand upright safely, he had to continuously think about his positioning and every muscle movement. He couldn't just do it automatically. So it wasn't that it just took him a long time. Once he even learned, he had to consciously think about every single move he made. It took him 3 months to learn to put on a sock. Same thing. Once he could put the sock on, he could not do it automatically. He had to use his conscious, intentional thinking and control in order to put the sock on. Now, I don't know about you, but I can barely, these days, like hold a conversation without some sort of distraction. I could not imagine having to think about how to stand while having a conversation with somebody. But anyway, our habits and our habits of mind, I think it just, like we just go back to being on autopilot, and then we gave up the let's reimagine education conversation. Let's not do the same thing with the Matrix. Let's not give up this conversation. Let's just keep having this conversation so that we can become aware of our habits of mind, our daily habits and actions in the world, and realize how they have been conditioned by this matrix. And look, if you have a better idea for how we can get out of this cycle of ego clash, let me know. I'm open to other ideas. But I think having this conversation about all of the paradigms, systems, narratives, whatever, that have conditioned us, and thinking about possibilities for the future, for what we really want, I think that's exciting. And look, I don't have answers. I'm just kind of spitballing here. And it's not about any one person having answers. It's about each of us figuring out the answers for ourselves and our families in a way that allow each of us to let that deep eye shine through. So I want to be really clear. I'm not trying to like create some sort of following or something. I think of this space as more about convening a field to have these discussions, recognize our conditioning, talk about how to decondition from it, and talk about how to move forward. But I'm also not talking about doing it in like a planning kind of way. Do you remember in the 90s, everybody was always talking about their 5-year plan? And I would interview with jobs and they would be like, so what's your 5-year plan? And I'm thinking like, dude, what? Like, I'm in my 20s. I barely know what I'm having for dinner tonight, let alone what I'm going to be doing in 5 years, because that's really going to depend on how I feel and what I want to be doing. And that can change at any time. So this is not like planning energy. So this is like messier than that. I don't know that we can plan our way to what we want. Well, I think we first have to figure out what each of us really does want. And I particularly don't think that we can plan because like the rate of change in our society now is really fast. So we could make a plan and then, next month something totally different happens. Some new technology, something else happens. And then what do? And it's interesting because planning is in and of itself a type of narrative that we get stuck on. I remember when I quit my job as head of school. I used to head a Montessori school and I had to give a year's notice. So I had to stay for a year. And I called my best friend to tell her that I quit my job. And she's like, well, what's your plan? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have a plan. And she was like, what? You have to have a plan. You can't just quit your job. And I was like, I I don't I don't know. I don't have a plan. Things ended up falling into place and I just kind of followed where I wanted to go. Now I recognize I'm saying that and there's some privilege around that. And I get that, but I just with the rate of change happening, that process of not having a plan and not knowing for certain where I'm going to go and just looking at the short path, like there's a path in front of me, but I can only see some of it lit up. And I just kind of take a step on each of that lit up part and just go with my gut of where I think I need to go, then I will end up where I need to be. But that planning narrative, it really now, I don't know why, but it feels really uh, archaic to me. Maybe that's just me. But with the rate of change happening, it's like, oh, good luck. You got to have some serious cognitive flexibility to be able to like pivot when something changes. And also, plans are created by our logical minds. So we can create a plan and we can rationalize a plan that seems logical and sounds good. And when you tell it to other people, it's really good. But deep down, it may not even be the thing that you really want to do. It may not even be the thing that really feels right. I see this happen a lot with people. So again, it comes back to we have to go within and figure out like what feels right to me. What's my inner vibe? What is my inner vibe? Not what does the world tell me my inner vibe should be? What does the world tell me I should want to do? But what do I want? How do I feel? What feels right to me? Because it's okay to feel. Feelings are important. There is no cognition without feeling. There is not. And the other thing is we can't logic our way to a better life. Logic can tell us how to build a weapon, but it can't tell us what to do with it. And if we think it can, that's because that's what the Enlightenment thinkers wanted us to think or believe, except for Hume. Hume rejected the Enlightenment project, and he said, reason is the slave of the passions and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. Hume understood that our passions, our feelings and emotions, these are the things that drive us. And they do. I know there's some people who think they're like so rational and that they can do things, make decisions without any kind of feeling or emotion. But I'm here to tell you that's not the case. Try making a simple decision without a feeling nudging you in one direction or another. Try deciding which appointment time to take when you're offered a couple of different appointment times for something. There's a feeling that's going to nudge you in one direction or another. So the Enlightenment paradigm of objective rationality, that's just a narrative that's just made up. It's not like real. So what if we actually consciously consider our passions? What if we look at those feelings as important data pushing us in a particular direction or showing us what we really want? Whereas we might have that egoic mind up here going, telling us what we should want, but what do we really feel? I think we should stop shoulding all over ourselves with that chatter. I think Ethan Kross talks in his book Chatter. He says something about there's some research showing that we can say close to like 4,500 words to ourselves per minute. But the State of the Union address that the president of the US gives annually is about 6,000 words, and that's spoken over 90 minutes. So think about how much, at least those of us who have chatter in the mind, because I know some people don't, but like think of all the things we're saying to ourselves and what are we saying? Now I feel like I can kind of hear some of you saying in my mind, the chatter in my mind is saying, look, dude, I got bills to pay. I don't have time to like think about my feelings. I have bills to pay. I hear you, dude. We're all in this like capitalist hellscape. I get it. I heard that like boomer narrative. No offense, boomers. Uh, my entire life. I totally understand. But I'm sick of that kind of narrative as being the excuse to uphold the matrix. I'm kind of sick of that. Particularly if you think about how we as humans, we have another narrative that we're so exceptional. Humans are so exceptional. We are so above the animals and the earth. And yet we're the only species on earth that has created a system where we all have to pay to live on this earth. So I guess that's exceptional, but like in a ridiculous kind of way. Like, what? So many of us, we walk around and we don't even know what will truly make our individual souls sing. And what makes my soul sing may not be the same thing that makes your soul sing. But we are cut off from ourselves, from our deep selves. We have these chitter chatter thoughts in our head that are often not our own. We don't know our own thoughts and feelings from those of others. We're not self-differentiated. But I'm here to tell you. So I have, I've never been licensed, but I'm trained as a family systems therapist. So my master's degree is in psychology, family systems therapy, or marriage and family therapy is another name for it. And there's a lot of research showing that people who are not self-differentiated, so that means people who don't know their own thoughts and feelings from those of others, they lead more challenging, maybe painful lives. So those who are self-differentiated, those who really do know their own thoughts and feelings from those of others, they are happier in all aspects of their lives, at work, marriages or partner relationships, with their friends, with their siblings, with their family, like all aspects of their lives. And this is something we're going to be talking about, self-differentiation. We're going to be talking about this throughout the podcast. Because if we can go within, identify what we really believe, decondition ourselves from the matrix programming, we can become more self-differentiated, and then we change our beliefs. We now act on those new beliefs. And then from that, a new matrix or new matrices emerge. But we have to do that work of going within first, and we have to do that work of self-differentiating. We have to do the work of becoming aware of our conditioning. Okay, so, at this point, you might be wondering, like, who the hell are you? And why should I listen to you? Well, you don't have to listen to me. You got to do you. But for me, who I am, I'm a human living on this like floating rock through space, trying to make the most out of life. I've experienced trauma. I haven't met a human who hasn't experienced trauma. I've had to overcome, and I still work on dealing with fears, anxiety, what ifs, blah, blah, blah. I am a mother. I'm a life partner, otherwise known as a wife. I'm a friend. I don't consider myself an enemy. I'm sure there are people who don't like me. Maybe they consider me an enemy. I don't consider, I don't know that I consider any of them enemies. I just don't want that kind of lifelong grudge energy in my life. I'm also a teacher. So I teach graduate students. I do teach at a university. This is where I should probably tell you that none of the opinions or anything expressed in this podcast is representative of my employer in any way. And I have 2 degrees in psychology, and I have my doctorate in education, which I got at the ripe old age of 47. And I'm a lifelong learner. So, what I have come to realize is that I have a perspective. I don't have the answers. I don't really know that I believe in there being the answers. I think there are many answers. There are many arguments for things um, based on people's perspectives and lived experiences. The longer I live, the more I realize that I know things, but like I also know like this much because there's so much that I don't know. So I'm not here in this podcast pretending to be an expert with the answers. That's not what this podcast is about. This is about, again, providing a space for examination of paradigms, systems, narratives that comprise our culture, our matrix, and thinking about examining underlying assumptions within those paradigms and systems and empowering each of us to go within to figure out what is truly meaningful for each of us. I am interested in each of us taking our power back and to stop giving our power away to other humans who, in the end, only want to extract wealth and power from us. I am interested in each of us using our individual power to create new spaces. I hope that you will join me in this conversation. There's so many things to talk about because we're talking about all things culture. There are so many things that we can talk about. I just want to warn you also, uh, I I don't have a full-on plan for this podcast. I've had people ask me that. What's the plan? How often are you going to put it out? Blah, blah, blah. Dude, I don't know. I'm doing this based on vibes. There'll be another episode, I'm sure, coming out soon because I've already got ideas percolating for next episodes. Again, I just hope you'll join me in this conversation and consider the possibilities. Consider the possibilities for you. What's meaningful to you? That's it for now. Till next time, remember, we are the Matrix.